Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. The next hour is all about the entrepreneur, why they start businesses, how they make their businesses grow, how they overcome failures and achieve success. Your host, Bob Gibbons, founder of Riata Commercial Realty, a commercial real estate advisory and tenant advocacy firm. Bob will ask probing questions to find impactful solutions that will help take your business to the next level. And now, here's Bob Gibbons.
Today's guest spent 10 years in telecom and IT consulting sales and made a great living. But a trip to Mexico changed all that. While visiting a high school friend in Chiapas, Christina Rossini met with the leaders of a coffee co-op, which explained their model and the need for fair trade in the coffee business. They then surprised her by asking if she and her friend would help them expand into the U.S. So Christina, maybe a little nuts, I don't know, we'll find out, created Enosor International Holdings and quit her job with that great salary and health insurance for her family. Never mind that she didn't know anything about importing and distribution. So we obviously have a lot to learn on this episode of The Next Level. So let's get to it. Go to capeltic.org. That's I didn't say that right. Capeltic. Capeltic. All right. I knew I was going to screw that up. capeltic.org to learn more about the co-op. Welcome, Christina.
Thanks for having me.
So the first question is, are you nuts?
I guess it depends on the day.
Okay.
I was, right before I walked in here, I was just talking with Jan about how I feel as though I have not yet found my rhythm in my schedule with my solopreneurship.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I feel as though I love being productive and high functioning and checking stuff off my list and getting things done. And I feel like I'm still working to get into my groove.
It will come. So Jan, you mentioned, is our producer. So thank you for giving her a shout out. And she's also the one responsible for having you on the show. So
shout out, Jan.
Yeah, she's great. All right. So before we get into all the story, let's kind of go back a little bit into your childhood. We're not going to make you lay on a couch or anything while we examine your mind. But what was did you have like early inklings of becoming an entrepreneur when you were young as a child or anything? Any little businesses that you said you just had to get out, build?
Oh, man. So two things come to mind. Number one, my first business ever was my little sister Anna and I sold watermelon seeds from a card table in our front yard.
Watermelon seeds? Why seeds?
I was trying to be resourceful. I thought, well, I've got all these watermelon seeds because I just ate watermelon and like.
But who would want watermelon seeds?
Well, you buy like flower seeds at the hardware store.
Oh, so you just thought people would buy them to start their own garden? Yeah,
I'm thinking, I'll just sell some watermelon seeds. I mean, I had no idea, 7, how silly that idea was. But I was enterprising. I'm like, oh, we'll do this. And no one bought any. Shocker.
You didn't sell any?
No.
And that's not really a surprise now, though, is it?
No.
Was it devastating then?
I think it was a factor of bad location.
Oh, that must have been.
It was our front yard. We didn't live on the corner of a busy street or anything. I think that plus, the ideation could have been flushed out a bit better.
Maybe. All right. You said that was one of two things.
Yeah. So second, I've always been interested in. I always loved doing my own nails, and I had all the colors of nail polish and everything, and I would do my friends' nails. And over the years, I've thought about maybe thinking about some kind of like a nail job or like a company in regards to incorporating nail technician or manicures and such. And in fact, even just a few years ago, I started thinking, you know what would be a great idea? A mobile on-demand nail salon. And I told a few people about that, but I could never really. I even wrote a very rudimentary business plan. I thought, I think it only cost maybe $150,000 to get it started. Like, buy a food truck, but outfit it like a really cute, pimped out nail salon, and do nails, and you can rent it out to, for birthdays, like kids' birthdays, bachelorette parties, adult birthdays, whatever. Bring it out to a business park, and if people wanted to go get their nails done during the lunch break. Well, anyway, so I thought about that for a couple years, and I never did anything with it. And then Cherry came along,
What is Cherry?
which is a mobile on-demand nail salon based here in
Really?
Dallas. Yeah,
I never heard of it.
Cherry.com. You can order a manicure to come to your home or office for $50. You can get your nails done.
Wow. So after this, do you think you could do anything with my nails, or should I call Cherry?
You know, call Cherry on this one. I didn't bring my kit with me.
Okay. Well, so those are two interesting but failed attempts at entrepreneurship. So what'd you do instead for a long time?
Yeah, so for a long time, I did what most people do is I just went and got a job. And I've had a lifelong career in sales. It started, my very first job was, I was the only non-relative at a family-owned lamp store, Royal Touch Lamp and Fixture Service over in North Dallas. And I worked there all throughout high school every Saturday. And then I got to college. I always was in food service, and I worked at a brewery and pool hall and a nail salon. In fact, I forgot about that. I worked at a nail salon as a front desk girl for a while, and candy store. I always had multiple jobs going because I always loved to have my own money, and I was flying to Europe regularly. So I wanted to make sure I could take care of that obligation. And then, yeah, I got recruited after college. I went to Central America for a bit after college. I came back in January to start my life and got recruited to work as a sales rep at a telecom company here in town. They're no longer around. They've changed names, but it used to be called C Beyond. And so I was there for a couple years and then left the industry but stayed in sales for 1 year and then got back into telecom, where I was for another 6 or so years until my recent exit.
So when you were traveling in Europe and South America, why were you doing those? Was it just tourism, or was there any other purpose behind those trips?
Yeah, so a bit of purpose behind the trip. So right after college, one of my college friends and I went down to Costa Rica and Panama for 6 months, and we were doing a work exchange. So we were working on a couple of different organic farms in exchange for our housing and our food. And it turns out, talk about like perception versus reality. We thought that we would be farming and taking care of animals. Maybe we really didn't have much of an idea. Reality, we were really just house sitting for these two people that owned property who they themselves were out gallivanting.
Hey, even better.
I know, right? It was so easy. It was easy and fun. We got to explore a whole lot of the countryside and, got to live like locals for a few months.
And then you said that was Costa Rica?
Yeah, we were Costa Rica for 3 months and Panama for 3 months.
Wow, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it was killer. It was awesome. And it was just a 6-month deal. So when the 6 months was done, I came back to Dallas and started my life in Dallas.
And that was after college or after high school?
After college.
After college. All right. So you were working in the telecom for many years. You did really well there, and I understand you're not the only one in the family that started a company. Your husband started a company, right?
Yes.
So what business is he in?
Yeah. So he's got a couple different things. Number one, he started R Squared Electric, which is a commercial and residential electrical contracting company.
Oh, nice.
He started that about 4 years ago. And currently he's kind of volleying between, he does that, and he's also involved with a different business interest with one of his friends that's in the automotive industry, totally unrelated. But yeah, I'm really grateful to my husband, Mark, for doing it. I feel like he did it the hard way because he does not come from a line of entrepreneurs, and he was the first one in his family to start a company. And it was totally new to him, whereas I was able to observe, and I feel like it's been markedly easy for me to blaze my trail and for me to do my thing because I've observed and watched him and learned over the last few years.
That's good to have. But at the same time, two people in the same family that are starting their own companies, running things, not having, the benefits of being with a larger company like you used to have with that nice salary. And I know you were in sales, so a lot of your income was still based on your own personal efforts in production, but you still had the health benefits and that kind of stuff. What did you guys do to sort of prepare for you to also go out and start your own company?
Let's see here.
Or did you?
What did we prepare? So in January of this year, I was doing some journaling and thinking and thinking about my future and what how involved I should probably take this, what was originally, or what at that time was a hobby deal. I had just gotten involved with this coffee cooperative, and it was starting to take off, and I kind of wanted to see how that would continue. Anyway, I was doing that, and also have this other little side hobby that I wanted to monetize, where I coordinate group international tourism and spiritual travel. Anyway, I just kind of had, and then I had this day job, right? So it's like I had coffee, had travel, I had this day job, and I was trying to get clear on how to tie all these up together and like bridge some chasms and really get self-employed. But I didn't really exactly know the best way to do that, and so I was talking with Mark about it, and I'm like, I really think I've got something here, maybe a couple things here in front of me for how to make a business and be able to get away from the day job. And he was the one who has been so encouraging and supporting. And he's supportive, and he's the one who was like, just do it, Christina. Like, just quit your job. You can do this. It's not that scary. It's not that hard. You're totally capable. And that was back in January. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, I like that. Thank you. But I need to put a plan together. So I put a plan together, and I knew in January that I'd be leaving my day job at some point in 2018. I just didn't know when or what it would look like. Or I also didn't think about, I didn't have a dollar amount in my mind of we need to have this squirreled away, in order for us to be secure. But I did know that I knew that me and Mark's like jobs, I guess, independent job situations needed to perhaps look a certain way. Like I knew that he needed to be in a position to be bringing in income for us to live on.
Right.
Because luckily over the previous 4 years, we were in a position to where I was able to support our income in our household with my job while he got his business kick-started and got it launched, and no bank loans or anything. So we were able to self-finance his startup.
Wow, that's so huge, not being in debt. So that's a big thing. Well, we're going to have to take a quick break. We will be back on the other side.
Hi, my name is Fern, and I've been an empowered team member at Alkali for over 5 years. I first learned about Alkali through an online job board and was intrigued to learn that Alkali was a Dave Ramsey endorsed local provider. But what captivated me was Alkali's mission statement, which is closely aligned with my own beliefs. So what's kept me at Alkali for over 5 years? First, Alkali's 5 core values match my own. Second, I've been empowered to use my unique abilities to impact our community, our clients, and Alkali. If you'd like to learn more about becoming an empowered Alkali team member, visit our website, alkaliservices.com. That's ALKALI services.com.
Welcome back. We're here with Christina Rossini. I don't know why I stumbled on that. She is with Enisor International Holdings, and we are talking about her decision along with her husband to have her become the second entrepreneur in the family. And so you guys got all your sort of ducks in a row. Mark was very supportive of all this. So what was kind of the first step? It sounded like you were already doing the coffee business while you still kept your day job. What was the tipping point at which you said, I'm just going to dump the day job?
Oh gosh. The tipping point was once I realized that I was not only producing at a fairly high level still at my day job, and taking care of business there, but I was spending more hours in the day running my coffee stuff than I was my telecom stuff. And I was like, this is getting unevenly weighted, and I don't want to go on. I don't want to feel any part of disingenuousness by not giving my all to my day job. Even though I'm totally fine with and bringing in the numbers I need to.
So you were still giving them what they really needed in terms of production, but the hours that took wasn't as much as you felt like you just didn't feel like you were giving them as much as you should, even though your production was still great. Okay. Yeah,
and I remember a conversation my husband Mark and I had in April. We were talking about what would be the right, our next moves. If he should, what he should do in terms of making some changes with his electrical company, and he knew very well that I wanted to leave my day job at some point in 2018. And I had a big it's worth mentioning, I had planned this this 5-week vacation, more of kind of a sabbatical, in June, from June 3rd through July 6th. I went on this hiking trip in Spain. I hiked the Camino de Santiago, and so that was in the books since like 2017. Like I knew I was planning for that, and so I
So
figured.
even before you planned to leave your last job and do this full time,
Yeah.
you had already planned that.
Yeah, and in fact, I was thinking,
Nice.
maybe a good time would be to go on my sabbatical and then perhaps look at resigning from my day job when I got back in July. But I didn't want to put that in stone. That was just like one potential idea. Yeah, so I told Mark back in April, I was like, listen, we're going to be reevaluating some things hardcore in 3 months in July. I was like, so let's just like continue to live life as we are, and we'll just be open to the possibilities that happen. And we'll take a look at perhaps making some changes in July.
Okay, so you go on this trip. So tell us about the trip real quick. You're basically hiking for 5 weeks. Is that
Yeah.
about it?
Yeah.
That-
My only job was just to walk.
Just to walk from one spot to the next. So you start in France
Hmm.
and you hike all the way across the top of Spain to the coast.
Yeah.
And why?
You know, it's something that had really been pulling me like a magnet for the last couple of years. And I didn't know why I felt drawn to go do this hike, which has been around for 1,200 years. It's
Mhm.
actually the original pilgrimage route, but well before the Holy Land and Italy got more popular back in the Middle Ages. Everyone hiked the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And I'd had several friends and family do a portion or all of it over the years, and I just felt really drawn to it. I'm kind of a contemplative person. I like to get recharged in nature and meditate. So I felt as though this would really be good for me to do. And so when I got there, I was even thinking and meditating and praying and thinking, okay, well, like, God, show me why I'm supposed to be here. I don't, maybe it's just a gratitude trip. And if that's the case, then awesome. I'm so grateful to be here. But if it's some other reason, I'm cool with that, and maybe I don't have to know right now. But yeah, that's the reason I went over there.
That walk is one that my daughter and I have talked about because we watched the movie The Way
Yeah.
with Martin Sheen, and we both really liked the movie, and we've always wanted to do it, but we haven't done it still. Hopefully we'll do it someday. But yeah, that sounds awesome. So you basically stay in hostels and other kinds of little inns in small towns and even big towns
Yeah.
along the way. So and you met, we've obviously talked about this, but you met a ton of people along that way. Do you feel like that trip and sort of just what you learned from that really made the difference in you going all in to the business when you got back?
Yeah. Yeah. So I met someone my second morning I was on the trip. So the beginning of my first day after, just the journey after I finished my first day. And he'd been on the trail for 3 months. He did a couple he did the Camino for a month and turned back around and he did it backwards. Anyway, this guy had been on the trail for 3 months without money for most of it. And anyway, he told me this story of something really profound that happened to him while he was on the trail himself. And we had this exchange, and I realized from his story, I picked up 3 specific lessons that really spoke to me. And those 3 lessons were change expectations, receive what you're given, and live in the present moment. And those 3 lessons really jumped out at me from his story. And then I kept thinking about his story and just my interaction with him the whole rest of the time. And I realized that I was learning those same 3 lessons on my Camino every day, many times a day. I was always reminded to change expectations and receive what I'm given, the good and the bad, and to essentially just live life on life's terms.
So change expectation, receive what you're given. And what was the last one?
Live in the present moment.
Live in the present. Okay.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I preface that as I say, I'm trying to get out of the predicting the future business. And I'm trying to really be cognizant about not putting a whole lot of plans together for myself, which it's so hard and so counterintuitive because we're products of our environment, and we're trained to do that and we're rewarded to do that. But I really am trying to put a loose framework together and then also still be open to whatever happens and what directions may unfold.
So that's quite different than what people expect to hear from somebody who's starting a new company, that I'm going to change my expectations, receive what I'm given, and just sort of live in the present and not plan too much into the future. You know, we're all told we got to create this big detailed business plan that projects revenues by month for the next 10 years or at least the next 5 and all that kind of thing. And you're saying, forget all that crap. So what planning are you doing? To what extent have you done planning to start this business?
Yeah. So, and I'll preface it with, I totally believe in business plans. And I believe in frameworks, to be sure. But I think it's very important to also allow space so that you can perhaps have a bit of spontaneity and be able to be nimble and
so it's not
and
an all
correct.
one way or the other kind of thing.
Right.
It's kind of a combination.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I think also it helps walking the Camino and kind of mentally being able to redirect and adapt to the Camino and life afterwards was really crucial. But also doing work in the developing world in Chiapas, Mexico, which is, as Graham Greene, the author, put it, the lawless roads. Like, it's you can't expect that everything's going to go according to plan because, I mean, it's something as basic as like a power outage where like my supplier loses internet for a whole day and can't communicate to maybe there's we're just coming, the cooperative is just coming out of a long-term coffee rust where there was a parasite that killed a bunch of coffee crops, like lost 90% of their coffee crops.
Oh my.
So you just, again, it's, you can plan for the best, but expect the worst, right? And so just kind of allowing opportunity to take its course. Yeah,
I mean, we're not in control of everything. And, one of the biggest things that back when I was in the big, in the corporate world versus being on my own and being an entrepreneur, starting my own company, when I was working for someone else, I didn't have control over a lot of things. And so I wanted to make sure my compensation was only tied to what I actually could do. And if any time there was something that came along that wasn't my fault or was beyond my control, I kind of wanted to find a way to carve that out and say, hey, not fair. I shouldn't be dinged for that. I should still be compensated. But in your own gig, when you're an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter what the reasons are. Either the income comes in or it doesn't. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. So as long as other people have the power of choice, then that's going to have an impact on you as an entrepreneur. And so having that flexibility you're talking about is very, very important. Okay, so what else on the Camino? Any other thoughts or lessons you learned on that? And I know one thing was you're talking about having being spontaneous. I know that at one point along your walk, you didn't walk. You chose a different mode of transportation. I
did. So the Camino is 500 miles across northern Spain, as you mentioned. There's a middle section of about 120 miles. It's called the Meseta, which is very flat. It's basically just Kansas cornfields for a little bit over 100 miles. And purely in an effort to make sure I conserved my time, because I did have my flight back home from Madrid and I needed to catch that. I made the decision to cycle those 120 miles. So basically condensed 6 or maybe 7 days of walking into 3 days of cycling.
Okay. And that's not considered cheating?
I guess it depends on your school of thought. Actually, what's funny is that at one point, so I stayed 2 nights. I cycled 3 days and stayed 2 nights in the Meseta. And on the second night, about halfway through, actually at the town that was on the halfway point of the Camino, this little town called Sahagún, I was staying at this Benedictine monastery run by this order of Christian brothers. And one of the brothers was like checking me in, getting my passport, my pilgrim credential, and taking my money for my 5 whole euros for the bed that night. And I asked if I could wheel my bike in and put it in the back garden. And he said, "Oh, you're biking the Meseta?" He goes, "You should be walking."
Oh.
And I was like, ouch, yeah, I should be.
So you were bike shamed on the Camino.
By a Marist brother.
Yeah. Like, oh yeah, you're the fount of all knowledge and All right. Well, we're going to take another quick break. We'll be back after this message. We're back. So, Christina, you've done your journey along the Camino, and now it's time to get down to business. You come back to the U.S. How long does it take you to decide to quit the day job after that and go all in on the business?
Well, I returned to work on Monday, July 9th. I worked a full day and I resigned it that afternoon.
So not too long.
Well, here's the thing. I intentionally was really trying to not think about work while I was on the Camino. I really wanted to respect that that time. And I feel like my mind was fairly well made up. And while I was on the Camino, it really became clear that would be the perfect bookend to my career working for someone else.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. I mean, I can see coming back from that kind of a trip, going back to work would be a shock to the system, especially if it's not something that you're really passionate about, your heart's not really into anymore.
It was good timing. Again, you asked earlier, like at what point was the tipping point to where I realized, it had been just a building crescendo of the coffee business had really taken off, and it was just taking so much more of my time. And I didn't want to, I wanted to be maybe ingenuous is the wrong word, but I wanted to really honor that and make sure that I was, fresh start, great opportunity to just get back from sabbatical, time to go all in with this.
Okay, so let's go backwards a little bit to your trip to Chiapas to visit your friend.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us what happened on that trip that started this ball rolling to where you quit your job and go all in with this.
Yeah. So last summer, one of my college friends, we've been friends for 15 plus years, he was about to go down to Chiapas for 6 weeks to run a research project for his master's in international economic development. And anyway, he and my husband were chatting about Chiapas, and my husband Mark said that it's been his lifelong goal and dream to go visit Chiapas, and he'd love to go check it out. Well, Stephen invited us both to go hang out and visit with him for a week while he was down there. So Mark said yes for both of us, and then realized a couple weeks later, he was like, this would be a bad time for me to get away from the business. I can't feasibly get away. But he was like, but Christina, you should go still. And I'm like, absolutely, I will.
Didn't take a lot of effort.
No, I never turned down a trip.
Yeah, you've been on a lot since I've known you.
Yeah, so I flew down to Chiapas, met Steven. I was basically just his shadow for like 7 or 8 days. And while we were down there, I learned, I was hanging out with him and was learning all about this coffee cooperative called Yomo Latel is this umbrella organization that's a non-governmental organization based in Chiapas. And they have, it's actually 28 pieces to this massive project, including a coffee cooperative, which is the largest, and a roasting facility, and a soap-making cooperative, and a honey co-op, et cetera, microloan financing piece, indigenous radio station, et cetera. Anyway, so the whole reason the cooperative exists is it serves about 400 indigenous small crop coffee farmers that each have between 5 and 7 acres of land. And they sell to the co-op, who then the co-op buys their raw green beans for a sustainable fair price, a consistent fair price, I should say, that's the same year over year. So the farmers can receive more income the more coffee they produce. The green beans then move to the roasting facility, which is a state-of-the-art roasting facility that the co-op owns and manages in Chiapas. It's actually the largest employer in that region.
Oh, wow.
And then so it produces the finished product. They make a couple different blends, whole bean, ground, et cetera, decaf. And then finally, the third piece of this value chain is it goes from once the coffee is roasted, it then is bagged and sold and distributed globally under the Capeltique coffee brand, right?
Okay.
The next piece of that is so first step is the raw beans, second raw materials, second part is the roasting, and the third part is the finished product of the Capeltique brand. There are 6 Capeltique coffee shops throughout Mexico. About half of the inventory from the roasting facility is then sold as product for as coffee for the coffee shops, right? The profits from the coffee shops, the Capeltique coffee shops, are then reinvested back into the cooperative, and it usually most of those profits are used to wet the basket for the microloan financing piece that the farmers can also have access to. At any rate, so that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of that. So I learned all that during this week in Chiapas.
And what does Capeltique stand for again?
Yeah, it's Seital for our coffee.
Our call.
Our coffee.
Our coffee. And
Yes.
Saytal is...
Saytal is the indigenous language. It's a derivative of Mayan.
Okay.
So it's the name of the Mayan, Spanish, or Mexican people. They speak Saytal. They are Saytales.
I see.
And so this big overarching cooperative, the Yomalatel, it includes like the honey co-op is called Chaptik, which is Saytal for our honey, and the soap cooperative is called Chapontik.
Okay.
Chapon is Saytal for soap, and Tik is our. It's a collectivist culture. They're very about oral culture, collectivist culture. So Tik is a word that's used very commonly in their language.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you were starting to learn now all this by shadowing your friend Stephen.
Yeah.
And so do you? I assume you must meet with all these people that are running the co-op.
Yeah. So we're down there meeting with these folks. I mean, like in the roasting facility, I'm like learning, like I'm watching some women make a new soap recipe, and I'm kind of getting a really great immersive cultural social innovation experience with this for the week. And while we're down there, the cooperative approaches Stephen and I both, and they're like, we're actually really well established out in Mexico. We're looking to expand into the U.S. market. Is this something that you both would be interested in being a part of? And we look at each other and we're like, well, yeah, the answer is yes, but how? Like, what are you thinking this looks like? What are the applications? Are we thinking, is this like holiday bazaars only? Or are we want to open up a capital T coffee shop somewhere?
You're at the farmer's market every Sunday trying to sell those things.
Right. So that was kind of how it started. So basically the application was, so that was back in August. And luckily he and I are activators and get a lot of energy from, we're able to take an idea and really execute it and materialize it. So it turns out we work really well together in that regard. So we started in December, we imported a whole bunch of embroidered goods from the Bordadoras Embroidery Cooperative, which is also there in Chiapas. So we brought a bunch of coffee and embroidered goods and sold at a holiday bazaar to rave reviews. And that kicked it off. And our next importation was sometime in the spring of 2018, and it really started catching on like wildfire.
So how did you know how to go about the importing? I mean, because I imagine there's all kinds of regulations around that, right? Especially with agricultural products.
So here's how it worked. So starting this business is such a perfect example in just do the next right thing, and like stuff happens and just doors open wide open, and just really blazed the path for us to do what we needed to do. So to answer your question, how we imported, so Stephen used to teach at Dallas Jesuit. He taught algebra for 3 years, a number of years ago here in town. And so he became friends with a handful of students and their parents. And one of the parents of one of his students is this guy that imports corn husks, and he sells to a lot of tamale shops and Mexican restaurants here in town. So he has this customs agent in Laredo, at the Nuevo Laredo border, and a short-term warehouse facility there and a transportation route to Dallas for his business. And so he learned of what Stephen and I were up to, and we're looking for a source to bring coffee regularly to Dallas. And so he just offered up and said, hey, well, I bring my corn husks over regularly, so just go ahead and throw your coffee on my truck, and I'll just drop it off at Christina's house, which is our U.S. distribution headquarters.
So if anybody comes over to your house, they're probably going to be put to work.
When people come to our house, they're stepping over coffee boxes in our dining room.
That's great. So you're basically tagging along with this guy and his business. So, I mean, is that something that's sustainable? I mean, are you still doing that, or is that?
Not sustainable, no. But we're so grateful for that relationship and that opportunity to be able to really kickstart us at no cost to us. Yeah. I mean, the wonderful thing is that we were not paying for that customs agent or any transportation, so that was fantastic. That's worked up until probably right about now-ish, we're thinking. Okay. And we figured once we get to a critical mass of importing like around 1,000 pounds of coffee a month, which we're nearly there, then it'll be time for us to put on our big kid shoes and have our own contract with that customs agent and figure our own stuff out.
So when you started this with your first couple of shipments, you're really just sort of testing the waters to see if people like it, like the story, like the coffee, et cetera. And you're selling it through just like what, farmers markets and
Not even. So
not even?
Here's the deal.
Family and friends?
So my family and friends, kind of, but my friend Stephen also happens to be a Catholic priest.
Oh, wow.
So he has this very large network within the Jesuit community, which is this section of Catholicism. So he's a Jesuit priest, hence why he was working at Dallas Jesuit.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he spent the last 3 years living and working. He was teaching a class at University of San Francisco, and he was getting a couple different masters at USF, University of San Francisco. And so he's always been like in school and also for the last year being a priest. So anyway, he's been spreading the word and sharing the story with a lot of people in his religious community. And here's the thing, here's why it's working, is because the story of the co-op is one of sustainability, conscious capitalism, helping others increase their own agency, the farmers, et cetera. And it's a perfect brand alignment with not only the Catholic Church and Catholic social teaching and social justice, but also that of the Jesuits that are all about that as well. So he's been talking to people within this niche of his, and it catches on really well. And so the story is great, and he's talking to people that are in academia at private and mid-market level colleges, universities, and high schools. And these are people that are like, hey, this is what we're all about too. We love this story. We want to support our Jesuit brothers. Oh, by the way, the Mexican Jesuits are high supporters of this cooperative in Chiapas. So that helps. So it's kind of like we're tapping into our network.
Those Catholics are sticking together, aren't they?
Oh my gosh.
Well, that's pretty cool. Okay, we're going to have to take another quick break, and we'll be back on the other side. Hi, this is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty. If your office lease is going to be expiring in the next year or two, the one thing I would tell you definitely do not want to do is exercise a renewal option. Now, that may sound a little nuts when you negotiate for that renewal option. Why wouldn't you actually want to use it? Well, the reason is because while you want to have one as a reservation for your space so the landlord can't lease the space out from under you, that option may not actually work the way you want it to now. It may have made sense 5 years ago, but it doesn't today. The only thing that changes when you exercise a renewal option are the expiration date and the rent. But you may want to do other things like have another option to renew, have an option to terminate or expand. You may want to be able to expand now or have a new base year for your operating expenses. There's all kinds of things that need to be considered. So we recommend that you renegotiate, not renew. For more information, contact me, Bob Gibbons, at texastenantrep.com. That's texastenantrep.com. We're back with Christina Rossini. Capeltique is the co-op that she represents, and her company is Innosor International Holdings. And so, Christina, we were talking about how you guys are really leveraging sort of the Catholic community, and more specifically the Jesuit community, to kind of create an opportunity for sales and create buzz and all that. Mm-hmm. So right now, are you still primarily selling into that network? Or I understand you have a big contract with a university now. So tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll preface it with, this is the first time in my life where I am not focusing on sales, which is a large part of what I know to do in my professional life. So I feel like I've gone from building this whole career and being a really good salesperson, and now I'm doing logistics and operations, and feel like I'm building the plane at the same time I'm flying the plane.
So Steve is more focused on the sales and you're more focused on the logistics.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, and building the shell of the company. Getting the CRM, hiring a bookkeeper, working on trying to think the next step ahead. And right now I'm starting to put together an ideate, perhaps a exclusive distributorship agreement that I'll talk with my supplier Capeltique about.
Wait a minute, so you don't have that now?
I don't have that now, but here's the deal. Presently, I am their sole distributor. So Innosor International Holdings is the LLC I set up to be importing and distribution. Presently, they are my only supplier, and presently, I am their only distributor for the U.S. So anyone that's buying this coffee is buying it through me.
Yeah, but that's totally loose. You have no protection that somebody else couldn't step in, and they have no protection that you couldn't go grab some other supplier.
Yeah, some other coffee supplier, exactly.
Oh,
So
wow.
we just started having those conversations, and we'll probably put something together here early part of next year.
And why so long? It just takes that long to make that happen, or is there any reason not to make that? I mean, to me, and I've never imported anything. I've never been a product guy, so to me, it kind of sounds like you're very much at risk by not having something really nailed down. In fact, naively, I would have thought that would have been the first order of business before you ever made your first import.
Here's what I've learned about doing business in the developing world is it's all about relationships. And actually the major difference between like Mexico and the US from what I've seen with this experience is my first real business meeting when I was meeting with Capeltique. After I'd signed on and like after we had made this handshake deal to be like, yeah, we'll import and we'll see how it goes, and I'll buy your coffee and I'll sell it and I'll wire you money, whatever. My first real time meeting with the executive team in Mexico City, where the business office is I kept saying, oh, I can totally sell this and we can go after the university market because the 6 coffee shops all happen to be on university campuses in Mexico. So I was sharing some great ideas for we can tap into the university system here, and sell and everything. And they said, no. We're looking to build relationships. We want to build bridges and the sales will come as a result. And that was a stark clarity of, okay, this is how Mexico does business. It's all about, again, it's collectivist. It's our multi-stakeholder model, all about building bridges and relationships. And commercialization is important, to be sure. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. But it's like relationship first and commerce later. It's really this like the conscious capitalism model, right, of people over profits to an extent. So in terms of the exclusive agreement, we're working on it. It may very well be expedited to happen later this year.
Interesting.
Yeah, but my biggest project right now is getting online sales up and running.
Okay. So that people can order just direct to consumer.
Yeah.
Okay. So who is your primary ideal client? I mean, you're doing that for the consumer, but is that really your primary ideal client? It's
not. So our ideal client is anyone who wants to buy about 500 pounds of coffee or more monthly. And we're talking, so our ideal client and what's working really well is mid-market private colleges and universities.
Now put that in perspective. 500 pounds of coffee, I mean, how much is that? How many cups of coffee does that make or whatever?
It's about 3,000 cups of coffee. So we're selling wholesale.
Right.
Yeah. So for instance, one of our largest clients is University of San Francisco. So we contract with the food and beverage catering service company that contracts with the university. So we're selling coffee to the food and beverage company that has dining halls and cafes on campus, right? Which is great. So we're starting with them at just one cafe at USF, which was a Stephen connection. That was a Stephen relationship. We also, and then the potential for scalability with that one client is huge because they operate 1,000 cafes across 33 states, and they're really big in the university system. Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's our primary target is universities and colleges.
Now that surprises me a little bit because I'm guessing that this is going to be a lot more expensive coffee than what people could get because there's the whole social aspect of this, trying to be fair trade, trying to give people a livable wage for every point along the food chain, the supply chain. And so it's going to be a more expensive cup of coffee, and yet you're trying to sell those to university kids who aren't known for their wealth. Is that not a disconnect?
Not a disconnect at all. For a couple of reasons. So number one, in terms of pricing, we sell a 1 pound bag of coffee for $15, which is very price competitive with the market.
Okay.
In fact, I was doing some market research yesterday at Natural Grocers, and they're selling coffee. There's a Mexican organic coffee from Chiapas that sells for like $17 a bag. So it's in line. The reason that most of our clients, our institutional clients, are on the West Coast where cost of living is higher, and university kids are spending $7 for a cup of cold brew coffee and $20 for lunch.
Oh my goodness, that blows me away. Of course, my daughter just was in LA recently. She told me she went to a movie with some friends, $21.75 to go to a movie.
For one ticket?
For one ticket, for one person. I nearly died. I couldn't believe it was so high. But All right, so you guys are out there doing all this. Steven's doing the selling, you're doing all the logistics, all this kind of thing. But you really didn't think this was the direction you were going to go, because you alluded earlier to another business, which is travel-related business, and you kind of thought that was what was going to take off and not the coffee. But is that really turned out to be the case?
Oh, God, no. So back in January, when I was doing all my journaling and kind of planning and thinking about stuff, for 2018, I thought for certain that I'd be leaving my day job to run my spiritual and religious tourism company full time, which is really just, it's been a recently monetized hobby that I've been doing the last 4 years, where I partner up with priests or choir directors or Bible study leaders, and I'll create a like a spiritual religious pilgrimage or tour for wherever they want to go, right? Italy, Holy Land. I'm leading a group to the Shrines of France this November, a group of 26. So it's, and I've even led a group, a small social innovation field trip down to Chiapas, Mexico, with some people here in Dallas earlier this year.
So now when you do this, are you arranging all of the travel, the hotels, the airfare, everything, or are you more the tour guide piece of it and somebody else does all that?
About 80% of the time to 90% of the time. What my model is, I go to an established tour agency that already has all-inclusive trips like on the shelf.
Okay.
And I go and basically first find out from my client approximately how many people, when you want to go, and where. Okay. And then once we have that, then I go to my vendors that are the tour agencies that already have these trips. And then I'll kind of lightly massage them to customize it a little bit. For instance, if it's a choir trip that wants to sing in at least 2 or 3 different places, or wants to go to a specific location while they're in this country, then I'll make sure that happens. But for the most part, it's pretty much off the shelf. 5 to 10% of the time, I'll make a custom trip. For instance, the Chiapas trip earlier this year, when we went down during coffee harvest to visit the cooperative, that was a fully custom trip, where I had airfare taken care of, and I booked all the where we stayed every night and all of our activities and everything.
So is this only for the Catholic community, or are you also doing this for other, Christian or even non-Christian groups, or even people that are not necessarily doing it for spiritual purposes, but for more the social, helping others kind of purpose?
So although a lot of my experience has been in the Catholic community, I'm not exclusive Catholic. So when it is a religious themed trip, I do work in the Christian space.
Okay.
However, this, I've had experience with mission trips, and like going back to when I was right after college, I spent 6 months doing this work exchange as well. So really my passion lies in creating community surrounding purpose-filled international travel.
And I guess you really couldn't realistically do a spiritual trip for any other, quote, religion. I mean, Hindu or Muslim or any other kind of, because you don't really know that. Mm-hmm. You don't know what their customs or techniques, the places they would want to go, right. All that kind of stuff. It kind of just wouldn't work, would it?
Right. There's other people that do kind of like I do that are way better at it than I am in that regard. But yeah, so I mean, back in January when I was doing this planning, I really thought that my travel company would be the reason I'd be leaving my day job. And then very rapidly, I realized that the coffee really eclipsed that. And the coffee is like 90% of my time and energy at this point. So it's talk about going back to changing expectations.
Yeah, no kidding.
This was a lesson in that.
Interesting. So you've obviously merged those two, though, with that one trip. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool, too.
Yeah. I'm presently kind of struggling with how to do personal branding, with how to cross this chasm between my travel company and the coffee business. And I think there's, and I feel like the social innovation pilgrimage that Stephen and I led together mm-hmm. Was a really good cross of that, and perhaps even, we'll probably take future trips very similar to that, probably on an annual, maybe even more often than that. And we could take other groups as well that want to see it, maybe like a female leadership and empowerment centered trip, sure. Perhaps, to visit.
So tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Yes. Christina at inissor.com, INISSOR. And
social media?
Yeah, social.
Any of that?
I'm still working on that.
Still working all that? Okay. Well, it's very unusual because, we've never had anybody come in on the show that is as early stage as you are. And so, you don't have everything set up. But that's kind of why I wanted you on the show, because I want to be able to have you back later when you have all that stuff done, figured out, and you can tell us everything. But I kind of wanted people to hear where you are right now. So unfortunately, that's the end of the show. Please go to capeltique.org to learn more about the co-op. And we'll be back next week with another great guest.